Okay, hello everyone. Is love about taking or giving? Let's get straight to the point. And the mere question tells you something very interesting. And that is that we really know nothing about love. Because you can have people who talk about love in terms of selfishness, and you have other people who talk about love as in terms of selflessness. Some of the more radical evolutionary biologists and philosophers like Schopenhauer and others, they talk about love in context completely of selfish, of survival of the fittest, of the perpetuation of the species, and that's what love is. Yeah. And then you find that people will go to the farthest extremes in this passionate drive to gain love, step over anybody, go to war, battle, kill, which only seems to indicate that love can be a very selfish enterprise, exercise. You look in the wild, you see how many species of animals go to war with each other just to control their harem or to control their territory. Then you have the other extreme. You have people who will go to the farthest lengths to sacrifice themselves and their own benefits because of the love that they have for another. So which one is it? If you ask someone, is it a selfish thing, love, or is it a selfless thing? So of course the wise people will say it's partially both. That's of course an easy way out. But let's dissect it a bit more, because obviously it lies at the heart of so much of who we are. Because there's no human being on earth that does not need love. There's no human being on earth that's not enhanced by love. And from the youngest age, it really shapes who we will be. The love that our parents give or do not give us, and the way they give it to us, is going to affect how we see ourselves, how we see others, what we expect from others. It's going to affect our own inner security and confidence, or lack thereof. There's not an area in life that love is not going to impact us. And of course, as we grow older into adults and become in need of love ourselves, meaning not just receiving it from our parents, but to give it, it's going to be a major component of our lives. Some people spend most of their life, whether they acknowledge it or not, really looking for love. Either a love that they never got, or they feel they never deserved. So wherever you twist and turn, the word love is going to come into play. And there still remains an enigma and a mystery, wrapped in a paradox, wrapped in a conundrum, with all the different wrappings. And nobody's mastered it. So I think it's wise to at least dissect it a bit, and I would like to submit here that based on the period in time we are now, there's some actual secrets to love that go back thousands of years that we can learn from and actualize and apply to our lives today, no matter where and who you are, whatever state of life you're at, whatever age you are. So dissecting it, you can make the argument that humans have many needs. We have a need for shelter, for a home, a roof above our heads, which protects us from the elements and just creates a little inner space where you have your own private space. You just kick off your shoes and be yourself, as opposed to living in the wild or living in the hostile world around you. We have a need for clothing. We have a need for food and drink. And we have other needs. I'm talking about needs now. I'm not talking about luxuries. Real needs to survive. Question is, where does love fit in? Is love one of those needs? Albeit it's definitely a more sublime need. It doesn't have quite the tangible element, let's say, that a shelter or clothing or food has. But it's just another need. It's a more sublime one. The need for intimacy, the need for companionship, for validation, for caring. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is that love is a reflection of something much deeper than just a need. which of course is where I'm leading to. we'll call it transcendence. That love can lead you to a place of transcendence. What does transcendence mean? Something far beyond needs, that you reach a place that's more than you are. A need at the end of the day fulfills something that you're lacking and makes you more of what you are. You're hungry, so you get food, so now you have more food, you have more strength, you have more power. Same thing with the other needs. Transcendence is the exact opposite of need. Transcendence means, in a way, what you're needed for. In a way, something to transcend yourself to reach something greater. Transcendence, when you stand in front in awe, let's say, of a beautiful sight in nature, or in awe of the birth of a child, or in awe of any magical moment, you're not talking about needs. It's not filling your need for being in awe. It's the exact opposite. It's not about you. You're suddenly engulfed and submerged in something greater than you are. And that has a certain way of elevating, uplifting us. And obviously, it goes without saying, I'm not holding a secret here, that I'm leading, obviously, that love is transcendence. But I think to appreciate like any concept, you want to compare it. You need to study in contrast. And I think when we look at love, how most of us have been fed, and I would even say programmed, to what love is, or what we learn by default, is very far cry from what it truly is. So where do we learn about love? We learn about love from our parents, or again, what they didn't do, or their own version of it. We learn about it from, obviously, friends and our own life experiences, and we learn about it from the media. I mean, there's no television show, there's no movie, there's no book, there's no poem, song that doesn't somewhere express love in some way. Healthy love, unhealthy love. So we have a whole bunch of images that are beamed and streamed into our consciousness that are shaping what we think about love. And how do we compare notes? How do we look at and say, okay, is this accurate? Is it distorted? Is it people giving us their own subjective view of what love is? And the last 30, 40 years, this has gone through serious radical changes with what they call the sexual revolution and the lower rate of marriage. Not getting into now a discussion whether marriages were healthier 50 years ago than they are today. But clearly it's less valued. Even on a cultural level, once it was unacceptable that two people just live with each other. I'm not talking about for religious reasons. It was customary. The institution of marriage was a respected institution. It was seen as being one of the foundations of a structured, civilized world, where there's the commitment involved and so on. A lot has changed in that regard. Sexuality and sex itself was bound with commitment. Many people say in 1965, when the pill hit the market, sexual revolution, sexual liberation, that now women too can have sexual lives without commitment. Because it doesn't mean they don't have to get pregnant. Till then, pregnancy was always a possibility, and a woman was the one that was shackled, if you want to call having a child being shackled. So began to be perceived as sexuality divorced of, we'll call it commitment, divorced of children necessarily. So a lot has changed, and it continues to change. And even lately, the battles and the arguments about what is marriage, same-gender marriage, is that marriage or not, and so on. And I'm not even discussing now from a religious point of view. I'm talking about from a cultural, a social point of view. All this indicates, without making the argument one way or the other, that there's plenty of confusion and no one has a clarity. That's for sure. Like, the only thing we're sure about is that we're not sure about this. That's the only certain thing. Okay. Now, I'm not coming here to pontificate the dogma of Judaism or Torah that this is the way. As you know my style, it is to just simply submit a formula, an approach that has allowed the Jewish people to thrive and be here thousands of years later. If you're building a business, you'd like to see businesses that succeed. I would want to study a business that's been around for thousands of years. How did they preserve families? That's the first thing. The first way a civilization will fall apart is when there's no family structure and there's no commitment. So how'd they do this? So the approach I'm taking here is not tell anybody or tell myself what to do. It's an approach. It's a alternative. Today everybody talks about alternatives. So here's another alternative. The alternative that we're going to learn from this month of Elul, which is called the month of love, actually. Virgo. Psula. Is the mazel, is the sign of this month that we're entering this Shabbos. Will be Rosh Chodesh. We'll talk about that shortly. But let's go back to the theme itself, the need. Now it's obvious if you're a scientist or a layperson or anybody, the first thing you'd fit love is into one of human needs. As I said earlier, yes, it may not be such a concrete, materialistic need. You can even say it's somewhat of a, as I said, sublime, sensual, spiritual need. However you define it, but it's a need. And as a need, at the end of the day, it's filling the void or vacuum of a human being's need for whatever it is that love provides us. Now, I'm not suggesting it's not a need. The question is it more than a need, or is it only a need? Like you're eating a meal, very few people are going to argue that it's more than just a need. It's a means to eat, to get the energy so you can live and do what you have to do with your life. The truth is, as we shall maybe mention later, that Judaism teaches that even meal is not just a need, that you can elevate it to a transcendent state, and even material activities like eating, sleeping, shelter, clothing, and even the basic mundane activities can also be spiritualized. But there, you can argue that on a basic level, it's a need of being filled. But the question with love, need. And if it is indeed a need, it has a whole bunch of series of consequences. So when two people meet and they determine, let us hook up together, let's marry. What does this entail, this contract? I'm not getting now into the legalities. I mean, what are they basically saying to each other? They're saying, I care about you, you care about me, so let's join together and build something. Well, I'm not going to call it a business contract, but there's a certain element of negotiation here, and give and take. What's the give and take? You give me some things, I give you some things. I forego and you forego some of our comforts in order to help the other. And hopefully it'll work. Now, what happens in a relationship like that where suddenly, or not suddenly, over time, one feels they're not getting as much as they're giving? So they could say, you know what? The contract has been breached. It's not exactly what I signed up for. I'm giving, the other person's not giving is what, or they may be giving, but I need more now. I've changed. I need more stimulation. I'm bored with this person. These are not uncommon statements, as we know. So therefore, since the whole love is dependent on a type of give and take, and even a pleasant give and take, like any business, you could have a cordial breakup, our partnership no longer working. And I think, but for both of us, you can find a better partner, I can find a better partner. Now, most people think there's no problem with that. At an ostensible level, it fits into anything, You buy food, let's say you buy bread at a bakery your whole life, and then another bakery opens up across the street, it's better bread and cheaper. So yeah, you may have some loyalty, but then at some point, if it's cheap enough and it's good enough, you'll find a way out. And no one's going to say that's a crime. Listen, it would be beautiful and gracious and kind of person, loyalty stays with loyalty. But we do find in this world people leave jobs for a better job. They may leave. They may be fired. I'm talking now even without any acrimony and without any negative stuff. Just people grow. I've grown out of this job. Or the boss will say, we've grown out of the need for you. We have machines that can do it better, etc., etc. So if love fits into that type of negotiable contract, this type of institution, then just like the President of the United States has an 8-year maximum, and then he can't be re-elected, and comes a new president, as we're going through now an election. That's all I'm going to say about it. And the same is with every, basically, institution. Things come and go. And therefore, also, let's spill it over even to the next step. The concept of forever after, love forever after, one could argue, even if you're not a major skeptic, nothing's forever after. Why should love suddenly be eternal? No one lives forever. No one holds a job forever. Money lasts forever. No food lasts. Nothing lasts in this world forever. I gave a talk, I mentioned this a number of times at one of the learning annex here in New York years ago. The topic was love forever after. Is it fantasy or reality? Fairy tale or reality? I forgot the exact title. So 50 people, young men and women, some different ages. I mean, young could be 50, so just for the record. So it was a little young. It was more in the 30s and 40s, I would say. Some were couples. And I asked a question at the outset. I said, so tell me, how many of you believe in love forever after? Out of around 50 people, one young woman raised her hand. One. I was somewhat surprised. Why was I surprised? Because not I was surprised that 49 did not believe in it. I was surprised they would acknowledge it, especially with their spouse sitting right near them. Like, how do you not raise your hand? You don't raise your hand in love forever after with your wife or husband sitting there, or boyfriend or girlfriend. It's not exactly very appealing to hear. And they didn't even look at each other. It was like a big thing, so what? And they made the case. I said, so what do you think? None of you believe in it? They said, yeah, it's a story of fairy tales, movies, books, novels, romance. When I was young, I dreamt, I imagined, idealistic, I thought possible. Then you realize nothing in life lasts forever. Why this suddenly? It's a nice ideal. It's nice to bring up our children with that belief. And what about that young woman who raised her hand that she does believe? She probably didn't get disappointed or broken in her heart. Once she come back to me, get back to me once she experiences some real heartbreak. Okay. So it was funny, and everybody acknowledged it. We talked. I said, you're all absolutely right. But I'm going to introduce you here, and I'm not here you didn't come here to hear me say the same thing, the same resigned and fatalistic statement that you all believe in. I came here to introduce another possibility. You know why you're saying this? Because you're all speaking from the perspective of human mortality. And everything in the human world is mortal and is impermanent and so on. So the only reason and possibility for something eternal is not because we dream of a fantasy, it's because we can introduce an eternal component into our lives. It's called God. And that's why in Hebrew, the greatest blessing you can make for a marriage is you say, a binyan adayat, an everlasting union. Actually, it's double everlasting, because the word ad means forever. Adayat, forever, forever. So it's like not just love forever after, love forever, forever after. And how's that possible? Because there's a third partner, which of course I'm going to discuss a lot more about. And then it's possible. Without that, total, of course, if you're a scientist, if you're an observer of human nature, if you are part of it, of course you're going to say, that how could it be forever? But there's another dimension in us. And that's where we get to the transcendence. So at the end of the day, as we shall discuss, love is more about giving than about taking. But it's natural that we're going to say it's about taking. Yeah, we give in order to take. In other words, we give something because we get something in return. But that's the natural way we're going to think about it, because no one has introduced us to another perspective. So here comes this month called Elul, this last of the 12 Hebrew months. It's a lunar calendar. We're going to begin the month in 2 days on Shabbos. Today is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 3 days. It's 2 days Rosh Chodesh in Elul, Shabbos, Saturday, and Sunday. Be a 30-day month, which will lead right into Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is 30 days from Shabbos. And Yom Kippur is 40 days. As you may know from the book 60 Days, the journey Moses takes. He goes up on the mountain on Rosh Chodesh and comes back 40 days later, Yom Kippur. So Rosh Hashanah, technically, Moses on the mountains. And the whole holiday season is kicked off, beginning with the New Year, renewal. So it's interesting, we have a whole month before renewal. In the secular world, December is maybe a month of sales between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Well, in Judaism, the month is not about sales. It's actually about earnings. It's about making accountability for the past year and seeing what we've earned, what we've accomplished, and earning the blessings for a new year. So Elul is a name which has an acronym, has a number of acronyms, 5 actual acronyms. Again, if you have the book 60 Days and the journey begins this Shabbos, and I may as well make an announcement that if you want to subscribe to a free email to follow the 60-day journey, just go to our website and do so. It's a nice email that's just like an excerpt from the book toward the meaning. I'm sorry, for book 60 Days. The book is obviously more in detail. A lot of people experience this, really see it as a beneficial because it's like a day-to-day manageable journey. It's not just climbing a mountain in one shot, it's step by step. So Elul, one of the acronyms of it, is a verse in the book of Song of Songs. And in this verse, 4 words, carries unbelievable secrets to the mystery of and mystique and enigma of love. And the verse goes, Ani l'deidi v'deidi li. Elul is Hebrew letters Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. Ani l'deidi, I to my beloved. Ani is I, l'deidi is to my beloved. V'deidi li, my beloved to me. Sounds like a simple verse, but when you compare it to another verse in Song of Songs, you start appreciating the order. There's a lot of messages in this verse, but the order. There's another verse that says, a little earlier, I believe, or maybe later in the Song of Songs, the exact opposite direction, order. V'deidi li, my beloved to me, v'ani loi, and I to him. So there the beloved begins, initiates, and then I respond. Where here in the verse of Elul, I to my beloved, I initiate, and my beloved responds. This is not a small little difference, as we shall discuss. This is the difference between give and take. When you initiate, you're giving. You're not waiting for your beloved to give and then you respond. You initiate. When the other way around, which is also a process, but not the process of Elul, is the beloved gives first and you respond. Which most of us would prefer, right? You go on a date, you want the other person to make the first move. You always want somebody else to do it, so it doesn't make you that vulnerable, and so on. I mean, in traditional society, I don't know how it is today, it was often the women had that prerogative of being the responder. It's like when you play chess, you play black, not white. So the first move is the male move. But today things have changed, so I'm not necessarily going to get, and I also don't want to be accused of sexism. You know, why can't women initiate, etc.? And I believe they can, so that's not the point. My point here is that Anila Deidi is I initiate, my beloved responds. Now, what lies in this? What is contained in this statement? The statement is contained the secret to love. It's a need. Doesn't work that way. A need. You have a need, and then you go look for someone who's going to fill that need. When you initiate giving love, it's like you're going to give. Not going to receive. You're going to give. So you're in a state of bestowing, of giving and producing. It's very, very different than when you're in a state of receiving. Now, this doesn't mean that love doesn't have an element of receiving. We'll talk about that. But it means that, above all, it begins with ani, it begins with you. It's the only thing in life that allows us to give and not to take. Everything else is a taking. And think about what that means. It means, precisely because we're mortals, that's why we're takers. Because mortals are not complete. Because we're not complete, we need something to complete us, so we're there to take what is going to complement us. If you're in a position to give, it means you're complete. You're secure. Now you have something to give to someone. And you have the strength to do so without the condition of saying, I'll only do so unless you give it to me. So really what it is that it's almost like we're being compared to the divine itself, to God. Who else is a giver and not a taker? God, the ultimate giver, who does not need anything. So in a strange way, this initiating is actually the sign of a true immortal person. Because you do not wait around and you're not like weak and give me. I have what to give. Not in an arrogant way and not in a condescending way, but in a powerful initiative way. It's also the sign of a leader. What's the difference between a leader and a follower? A follower waits for someone else to initiate. A follower reacts, and a leader proacts. Reactive or proactive. Now, we all love to hear, I wish, the idea to be proactive, to initiate, to be a pioneer. But these are words. To act on it means actually being someone that feels the confidence that you have what to give. And it's not based on conditions of I'll give if so-and-so. Like the guy that told me, I asked him, can you have, what unconditional love is? He says, yeah. I'm ready to give, if she does so-and-so, I'll give her unconditional love. Didn't even blink when he said that. Now, you could say, so why would someone do that? The answer is a person who's a giver and a proactive person never asks such a question. It's only people who are takers ask such questions. Someone who has that will never ask such a question because that's how they are. It's who they are. It's just like a wise person gives off wisdom and a person who's a kind person gives off kindness. A loving person gives off love. Now, we'd all love to say we're loving people. So why are we so dependent on what others are thinking about us, and why are we so reacting to others? Because maybe you may be a loving person, but it's undercover. And it's not in a state of you being able to take charge and say, I'm going to love. And when I'm going to love, love breeds love. Now, on a deeper level, what this really is, goes back to what the real definition of love is. Go back to need versus transcendence. So if it was just needs, everything I'm saying now would not work. Because if it's a need, I'll only go for as much as what I need, and I'll give according to what I need. I don't have to give if I don't need. But if it's more than need, if it's something else, then it becomes a reflection of a deeper part of our personalities. And this leads us to transcendence. And this is also the reason that most people don't come to this on their own, because the human intellect and human experience can only figure out things based on human terms. Here's what the Torah says about love. Schopenhauer and the other thinkers, they will argue that love is what nature's trick to get male and female to breed. It's actually the words of Schopenhauer. He says that nature tricks us and deceives us into thinking that it's for our good to marry somebody else, when in truth it's simply nature's way of getting two people together. And as soon as, that's why he says marriages don't work, because it never lives up to expectations, because once you have children, nature has gotten what it needs. It doesn't need anything more, so therefore love does not last. This is not my words. I know it sounds very cynical, but that's exactly what he writes. You can look it up. What is love from a Torah point of view? Love is a gift of God to the human race. It's a gift from a greater place. Take love out of the equation. Imagine a life without love. Not love from parents to children, not love from children to parents, not love from siblings to siblings, friends to friends, spouses. All that we know about love didn't exist. What kind of world would this be? It would be a machine that may be very efficient, but there'd be no transcendence. There'd be no entity that's ready to do something for another unless it serves them. You see all these nature shows in the animal kingdom, with all their beauty, there's something very brutal and heartless. All the preening and the courtship of different species, whether it's peacocks or lions or leopards or the fish, and the songs they sing and the showing off that they do and the sounds that, all the different things. At the end of the day, you look at it, that once they are intimate, there's no relationship. Yes, there are certain expressions of affection. There's no commitment in most cases. There are the few species that have lifelong commitment and so on. And there's a lot of beautiful commitment, how penguins protect their young, how many species protect their young. But there's certain, when you look at it, it's almost like a clock. Every species is doing what it has to do to survive. And that's it. The concept of going and sacrificing and going against nature, you don't find that in the animal kingdom. No animal goes against its nature. It's all part of its nature. Human beings, we have a dimension. We can be very selfish, more than animals can be. But we could also be selfless in ways that no animal ever does. Not to take away, there's nothing wrong with them. They're doing exactly what they were meant to do. So we have a gift that was given to us. In the chapter called Love, in Tanya, Lev, which is heart in Hebrew, chapter 32, also can be pronounced as love, chapter Love, right? He says that the true love is when you have spirit dominates over matter. Because as long as a person worships and sees their body and their material life more important than their spiritual life, they really can never love another. Unless that person is an extension of themselves and fills their needs. It is the spirit that allows us to get beyond our physical parameters and care about something outside of us. And therefore, he says, that's why it's the entire Torah, because the entire Torah is coming to teach us how to be spirits that use the matter, our bodies as a vehicle, rather than being material people who are on a spiritual journey. And that changes everything. Because what is transcendence? As the Bible puts it, Adam and Eve, God created male and female as one. He separated them, and then they search for each other. Al-Kain Yazev. They search for each other. Why? To reconnect to their other part of their soul, what we call soulmate, and and thus two halves of one whole reconnect to their divine dimension. Then there's a blessing, Pruruvu. I bless you that you shall be fruitful and multiply, build a home. So it's interesting. Everybody misunderstands and says that Judaism is all about having children. There's no real love. It's all about building large families. It's the exact opposite. Read Schopenhauer. Read the biologists. Evolution is only about perpetuation of the species. There's no end to love as its own. Love, some even say it's an evolutionary quirk, all this courtship. Imagine how much money would be saved if there's no dating and no courtship and no bars and no museums and no art. You don't have to go for a walk. Like two bacteria. Get together, breed, and invite it, and go further. Why? What do we need this whole elaborate, seductive courtship, foreplay process? And you see that in the animal kingdom, there's no wasting time. You do what you have to do. Yes, they compete. They show off. They do what they have to do. And we human beings have this whole thing. So some people say, you know what, let's do away with this evolutionary... They say it's a mutation, that we've created this romantic vision of love. It's just a matter of species perpetuating. Judaism says no, it's a matter of two soulmates connecting, and connecting to God, which is really the purpose of all life, to transcend and relieve the human existential loneliness of our lives, because we can connect to something that is beyond human. That's what love is. It's the kiss of God. It's the face of God. And that's why the Shir Hashim, the book of Song of Songs, written by King Solomon, and the verse I mentioned, I to my beloved, you and my beloved to me, is an entire love song to a beloved. To whom is he writing this song? So Maimonides says this is a song that's writing that the soul writes to God. It's in the story of a man and a woman, of a husband, of two lovers, physical, humans. But it's really a metaphor for our connection to something greater than ourselves. Now, if you look at entering into love as an experience of transcendence, all the rules change. So it's not just, I'm not getting my needs met, or I am getting my needs met. What do you mean needs? It's a transcendent experience, not about your needs. It's transcendence. And transcendence translates into me experiencing it. As I said before, you don't spell it out in terms of what am I getting from it. It's an experience. And therefore, it's initiated by you, because it's not about I'm waiting to see what the other person is going to do. It is coming from my soul's need to reach a greater place. So I reach to my beloved. I transcend. I will do what is necessary to transcend. And then comes the second half, the beloved to you. Not as a condition, but here's the interesting paradox. That when it comes to love, the more you take, the less you get. The more you give, the more you get. It's opposite of everything else in this world. Why? It's not that way with food. If I give you more food, I have less. You may appreciate it, but I have less food. Because materialism is defined by measure. I have 1 pound, I give away half, I have half a pound. I have $1,000, I give away half, I have 500. That's how it is. I'm sitting in my chair now. If I give up my chair to you, it's a nice gesture, but I don't have a chair to sit. In love, being that it's a transcendent, if it was another maybe sublime need, then it would be the same thing. I give and therefore I have less. So why would I give more than necessary? Like I've had, I can't tell you how many couples have told me, why would I give him more love than I need to give? So in other words, it's completely defined in terms of all other, what do we say, commodities. But I understand where that person's coming from because no one ever told them love is different than a loaf of bread. But if love is transcendence, is there a statement like, why would I give transcendence? That doesn't even make sense. The more you give, if you want transcendence, the more you transcend, the more you want of it. It's like saying, why would I climb the mountain to see a broader horizon? Let me just be satisfied with a little smaller horizon. Now, obviously, this is the formula. The complicated part is the human side. Because then when you're dealing with the other person and you see that they're, let's say, stingy, and they're not providing something you want, so it's easy for us to gravitate back into the human mode, and then we get into this negotiation mode, that you're not doing it for me, therefore I'm upset, blah, 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 blah. But if you really want the secret is, it's not about the human needs, it's here about transcendence. Now, if both parties see the transcendence, then you have the most beautiful love possible. The challenge would be if one person is transcendent and the other one is not. But even then, there's an unbelievable beauty to it. Obviously, it can be painful and difficult. Like a classic story where the guy, unfortunately, his wife contracts Alzheimer's. And years roll on, and slowly she starts forgetting. First you forget your keys, and then you forget dates, and then you forget appointments, and then you still can control it to some extent and hide it. But then the sadness comes when you start forgetting your loved ones, your children. And it's not over one night, and it's not always the same. It's those that have ever seen it, it's extremely difficult to experience, especially if you're a family member. And there comes a point you don't even recognize your spouse. At some point, this woman had to be in the hospital because she couldn't take care of herself. But her husband would come visit her every day. At one point, a nurse tells the husband, I'm sad that I see you come every day and it's beautiful. But I have to tell you, your wife no longer recognizes you at all. It's not like one day maybe yes, maybe not. Then you could still come because you're hoping maybe there'll be a moment. And there's no point for you to come. She doesn't recognize. So he looked at the nurse and says, yes, but I recognize her. See, that's transcendence. No selfish person would answer that. He'd say, you know what? You're right. She doesn't recognize me. What's the difference? I could stay in my office. I could always send a messenger, if need be. But not a transcendent person will never say that. Now, he's not getting anything at that point. But he doesn't think like that. It's not his thought. It doesn't work that way. Now, obviously, it's painful. I'm not suggesting that's what we look forward to, God forbid. And obviously, for a man to do that meant that he had a relationship with her for many years that was transcendent. She didn't just drop her now because she's unable to recognize him. And secondly, how do you know she doesn't recognize him? Maybe there's a part of her soul that does. And we don't see it. Maybe medicine will one day discover that, do you ever see the movie Awakenings? Oliver Sacks. So they found these people were in a type of catatonic state for 30 years or something, and some medication, they get them out of it. And it's a very, very touching story. He writes the book and then the film. So there's one scene there that's very powerful where a young woman comes to see her father, who's already completely senile. Now this guy, one of the guys that I think it's Robert De Niro, the actor, that comes out of the catatonic state, which means he's like in a state of complete, you don't think he hears or sees anything. And she says, you think my father hears me? I read to him. I come to the hospital and I read to him. He says, he hears everything you're saying. Don't ever think he doesn't hear you. And he was talking from experience because he knew that when people came to see him, they thought that he doesn't hear them, but he did hear them. So we don't know what's going on in the human spirit. But regardless, that was not the issue here. The issue, he wasn't doing it for her. He was doing it for him because he's not in the mode. This is not a business negotiation. You know, that I'm not getting what I want, so I'm out of here. Now, I understand that we have been programmed and we've been conditioned to think not like this. So it's even though what I'm saying could be refreshing and resonates, but to implement it is not easy because we're not trained to think this way. We are literally on a daily basis facing hostile forces. So we've learned to become defensive, protective. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be hurt. We have a whole array, an arsenal, and layers of armor to make sure we're protected. And I understand why. As I said, you live in a human world, dog eats dog, so you have become a shark like other sharks, or protecting yourself from sharks. But that's why there's a month of El and there's a gift. We get a gift here this month that's telling us there's another way to look at it. And you could start anew. And it begins with yourself. It doesn't begin with others. It makes no difference what others have done to you. You have transcendence inside of you. You have a soul that's not man-made. And that soul is able to achieve everything. And when the soul speaks, it speaks in the language of love. Now, I'm not suggesting someone can be selfish and love as well. There are people, very selfish people, and they're very loving. But I don't see it lasting and enduring. It'll be conditional. There'll be places where you will not see, and sometimes you'll actually see viciousness when they don't get what they want. And then you find loving people who are just, a loving person is a loving person. They exude love because they're loving, not because of any other thing. I've talked many times about the difference between a good person and a person who does good things. A person who does good things, while you're doing good things, you're doing good things, that's fine. But it doesn't mean you're a good person 24/7, even when it's inconvenient. You're good when you want to be good, or when it's worthwhile, or when you're trained, you're programmed to be good. A loving person, same thing. A loving person doesn't just do loving things. They just exude love. Around them, you feel love. You feel kindness. You feel giving. And not out of weakness. We're not talking about a pleaser. We're not talking about someone who's doing it to ingratiate themselves and so on. We're talking about a person, the strength. Light, a luminary gives off light. A sun gives off light. It does not do so because it's getting something in return. And the confidence that you build and the security that you're able to be proactive without conditions is invincible, because nobody can destroy that. Someone can destroy something that's conditional, so they get rid of the conditions, and therefore the giving stops. But this cannot stop. So I know this is the optimal version of Ani l'dei v'dei dili. So therefore it's initiated by you. It's not like a child is v'dei dili v'ani loi. The parent gives love, and the child is the recipient. Not that children don't give plenty to their parents, but at the practical level, the early years of our formative years, children are dependent on their parents. You can't say the child is going to know how to give to their parents and get in return. The child can't ask. A parent is sensitive. God wired parents in a way they'll be sensitive to their children. So it's v'dei dili, my beloved to me, and then I respond. But as we turn into adults and we begin to develop and grow, then what's expected, what happens then, is that you actually become the source, a giver, instead of the taker. And as such, it's a whole different story and a whole different picture. Now, I would recommend, if anybody's in a relationship and they have this, it's a great conversation piece. Have a conversation with your beloved. And see, you learn a lot about these things. Some people will say, I don't understand this at all. No. Love is only when I get what I want, and I'm not sure why you're not giving me what I want. There are people locked in that place. But everybody can learn. And you learn most by example. I've had a situation where someone was a transcendent type of person, but they said, my spouse is not. So I'm slowly turning into her instead of her turning into me. So I said, that is not exactly transcendence. Why, you have to be the example no matter what. I mean, it would be, there has to be, you cannot start succumbing and weakening your state because of what's going on around you. Now, obviously, case by case, because I can't say there's a formula, because at the end of the day, it takes two to tango. So you need to have a relationship with somebody. But the standard that I'm describing now is the one that we have to take this attitude. Okay, so now, of course, comes the big question. So here's a couple, and they get into an argument. This one says, Anila Daidi, you should be initiating. And the other one says, you should be initiating. What do? So clearly there's a big problem here. Because Anila Daidi is not a statement that you tell others. It's a statement you tell yourself. It's not like we're going to, once you start using it as a stick, then it defeats the whole purpose. The whole point of it is that you initiate, it makes no difference what the other person is going to do. And I would love them both to initiate and let them argue who's going to initiate, instead of who's going to them argue that blaming the other. In other words, they should both argue, I want to be first, instead of why don't you go first. So we have in these 4 words a formula which is, it begins from you. Begins from you. I can tell you from my own limited experience, most relationships unfortunately suffer, not because of objective reasons. It's because people don't know how to do anila deidi v'deidi li. They don't know how to initiate. Now, sometimes they're not at fault because no one ever taught them. But that's the root of a lot of issues, because almost everything can be conquered. Now, I'm not talking about, there are obviously exceptions. There are scenarios where illness or other things may come into play. But even there, as I pointed out, with the Alzheimer's. Now, obviously, if she had Alzheimer's, God forbid, before they married, before they even dated, it would never have happened. So that's understandable. That's why I'm saying there are circumstances. But in most, I would say, normal cases, without any, according to, what's the word I want to use? Circumstances. What's the word? Unnatural circumstances. It's another word. It's a legal term. Whatever. If not for unnatural circumstances, in most cases, it's human error or human efforts that can be, what? That's not what I was going to use, but fine, I hear. But the question is if that's really accurate or not. That has to be determined objectively. The point I'm making here is that many people's, their insecurities and their inability to give, that becomes the real problem. Because when there's giving, you more or less almost have a scenario that it becomes almost impossible to destroy. It's when there's no giving going on, that's when the problem. When there's no anila deidi, there's no initiating that I to my beloved, that's when things begin to suffocate the relationship and the love. There's so many examples that I can give for this. I want to share one. There are people, unfortunately, grow up in this world in homes where they were abandoned or other forms of hurt. So you can imagine when they get into a relationship, one of their fears is abandonment. They're afraid their husband or wife will abandon them. And they have very high antenna, that person, to the point that they'll read into everything, even things that are not abandonment, they'll see possible abandonment. That's how it is. Because you feel that you don't deserve love. So one scenario that happened with me was a couple that had these issues. Well, one of them had these issues. And when they were in that state, they would become very abusive to their spouse, saying things like, you're a betrayer, you're a liar, you're cheating on me, when there was no basis for it. So, of course, the spouse who understood where it's coming from, but at some point, emotionally, you start reacting, you know what? I've been giving to you unconditionally, even though you start hurling all these accusations. So he called me in one of these scenarios, and I said to him, I know you're not going to like my advice, but my advice is that you should swallow your pride and your anger and send her a beautiful bouquet of flowers. He said, are you crazy? I want to divorce her now. What's sending a bouquet of flowers? So I said, you're asking me my advice? That's my advice. He did it, to his credit. And ultimately, the real thing behind it was because he did not react the human way. The human way is tit for tat. Someone punches you, you punch them back. I understand that fully. But that's not transcendence. You may even be entitled to do it, may even be justified. But that's not love. That's not how love works. What love works is that when someone's in a weaker state like that, or whatever it is, and as much as they're hurting you, you send them flowers. Remember, we're talking about someone that you have a relationship for years, and you have children. It's not like, I'm not talking about a first date. And what happens is, in some way, it shakes that person up. It's like it's a shock, because they don't expect that. They're expecting more abandonment. They yell at you in a way they like almost want to set it up that you should leave them. They're sabotaging the relationship. And when you do that, not to expect that, the person, I can't believe you sent me flowers. I realize now the mistake I made. That doesn't often happen. But over time, what happens is something seeps through. Because a person who's been abandoned is realizing here's a person who doesn't abandon them. And even when they yell and scream, an intelligent person realizes, he transcended it. Now, does this mean we're supposed to tolerate all kinds of abuse and there's no limit, and you just be the punching bag even for someone like that? Obviously not. In the Alzheimer's case, there was no choice. She had no choice. It wasn't her fault. I'm not suggesting we become a doormat and a punching bag for a spouse. That's not appropriate either. That's why I have to qualify all this case by case, because there are situations that you have to get objective advice what to do if there is a real imbalance. In other words, if you're totally transcendent and you're really giving and you're being the best you can be, and there's problems happening, you need to have advice. I'm not suggesting transcendence conquers all, because again, as I said, it takes two to tango, and the other person may have real issues, and you have to address them. But I'm suggesting overall, this formula, especially if both parties are able to embrace it, is the key to all successful relationships, and is the key to enduring and lasting ones. Because almost everybody can find a relationship that lasts for one night. I don't mean it as a one-night stand. I mean, something that's temporary. Temporary, but sustainable, lasting, enduring. No, that you can't fake. That only comes if there's something transcendent. Now, instead, there's marriages of convenience. I hate this joke, but it just always comes to my mind when I mention that, marriage of convenience. We're married for the children. Like there's two older couple, they're already 101 years old, 100-year-old couple. They come running to the rabbi. They want to get divorced. I said, how many years are you married? They said, 80 years. They said, 80 years you're married? Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, yeah. So what's the rush? You're already 100 years old. They said, we can't stand each other. One more minute, we want to just divorce. So why'd you wait till now? We said, we waited for the children to die. Okay. This is this morbid, unpleasant joke. But basically capturing the idea that there are marriages of convenience, which are sad. Maybe it's better than nothing, but I'm not advocating that. My point that I'm making here is that is another side of the story. But then there's the real option. The real option is discovering transcendence. So it's not a sideshow to say that when a couple getting married, they should take upon themselves, in the Jewish context, Shabbat, Friday night dinners, kosher, family purity, having a sacred sexual relationship, and other spiritual things. Like once a month, I would suggest is to host something in your home, a class. Maybe once a week, you and your spouse study something together. Why? These are not side things. These are not just nice things. They feed the spirituality of the union. Instead of the marriage just being, okay, you work, I work, we put our bank accounts together or not together, and we do certain things together, you build your spiritual union together as well. And many marriages don't do that. Even good people. You have to nourish transcendence. Transcendence doesn't just happen. Especially in a world that's all about survival and all about the here and now. You need to feed it. I think I mentioned this story about a couple, couples that I counsel or marry off. I always make these recommendations I just said, and listen what happened. There's a couple, they were not particularly observant, but they took upon themselves every Thursday night they would study something together. They read a book, something from the Torah, something spiritual, something they both found. Anyway, they're both very hardworking people. Years rolled on. After a few years of marriage, it was really bad. And they were at the edge. They weren't talking to each other. they were already ready for divorce. They told me that the only thing they kept was the Thursday night class, even when there was the worst of times, because they made that promise. And that saved their marriage, because that became the oasis upon which they rebuilt everything. Had they not had that, they would have nothing left, because they were not working together. Everything else had fallen apart. So it was their soulfulness that saved them. It saved them, because it was there for them to hold them up. If their marriage was all about needs, their needs were not being met. They were both at war with each other. But they did something that was not about their needs. They studied together. They did something greater than themselves. And that greater gave them more than they could have ever have gotten. And then they rebuilt, because they kept doing that. And then they said, this is ridiculous. We have something in common. And they stepped back and they realized they had children, etc., etc. So this comes the second paradox. Just like I said before, in love, as opposed to the so-called the mathematical formula, the more you give, the more you get. The less you give, the less you get. Giving is what makes you get, not taking. The second paradox, if you want to put it that way, is that when you let go of yourself, you get more of yourself. That's what transcendence is. See, you begin by thinking, oh, I have a self, an ego, a personality, and I want more. So you start filling your needs. What you're getting more is more of a mortal person, so you're getting more of something that is weak in the first place. When you go the other direction, and it's not about me and my needs, but I am connecting to something greater than I am. So in a way, you're giving away of yourself. You could say it's sacrifice, but it's really not. You're not annihilating yourself. What you're getting in return is the real self, because then your self becomes connected to a higher, eternal source, and that is not mortal. So the interesting twist when it comes to these things is that bittul, or the type of sublimation of self, the suspension of self, gives you more of a self than you could ever get through your own efforts. Because your own efforts, you'll get A, B, C, D. Sani l'deidi, I am to my beloved, gets from my beloved to me much more than if it was the other way around. The other way around, you'd wait, they'd give you on their terms, yes, a little more, a little less. You're initiating, you've gone outside of yourself. And then what you get in return is a love that is impossible to break. So this is the month of Elul. We begin the Shabbos Saturday, then Sunday, go for 30 days, and it's a step-by-step process. Every day you can focus on another dimension of it, but it opens up the real beauty, the real treasure that is love, the dimensions, because a transcendent love is about a journey, I'm looking for the right word, exhilarating journey into the unknown. A selfish love is basically just filling and getting more of yourself. So it may be satisfying for the moment, but it does not have that exhilarating, doesn't have that broad panorama of opening yourself up to another person. So people you'll see that are married many years, and they have that deep love, it's for them every day they discover new things about each other. And they never get bored, because they're not looking, what's in it for me? They're looking, what can I learn? Or how can I grow? They're looking for the God dimension within it. And mystique is not something to be afraid of. You don't have to control everything in this world. Control is a domain of takers. Givers don't need to control. They give, fine, and that's good for them. So bless you all. To a very healthy Elul of I am to my beloved to me. Those here that are, I know you're getting married shortly, just a few weeks. I wish upon all of you to find your soulmate, transcendent soulmate. And I think I made a questionnaire online, how to identify a true soulmate. Like 20 questions you should ask yourself or that person. You can look it up. You already found it. We're not worried about you. But I wish upon a month of love between us and our close ones, and love between us and God and us. Because at the end of the day, it's love that ultimately is the strongest force that's more powerful than hate and discord and all the vices and maladies that plague the human condition. And thank God that we have it. The purest form is when you see parents unconditionally loving their children. because that creates and shapes the model for which that child will then be able to unconditionally love someone else. It's hard to imagine how difficult it would be for someone who has not received unconditional transcendent love to give unconditional transcendent love. But the good news is that we all can do it even if you didn't get it. It's harder, but you learn about it and you find it, you'll see it resonates more. And that's how I leave it here. I'm not here to, as I said, I'm not arguing the case, I present the case. You tell me which model works better. What resonates more. I mean, I have no doubt what resonates more for me. The music of it all, and we all have, as I said, a blessed Elul and a blessed New Year. And we'll continue this journey next Wednesday. I will be going to the Holy Land tomorrow, but I'll be back before Wednesday, so I shall be back next week. Please God. Huh? Unless God has other plans. Good plans, I should hope. And yes, and everybody have a very pleasant week and a pleasant Elul and a pleasant New Year. And please see us and me and as a resource. We love each other. Good night. What would I do without you? Every week I feel token validation.